streaming.
Good evening. How's everybody doing out there? We are just checking some dials, making sure that we are 100% live, guys. But welcome to tonight's show. Should be a great one.
We're live.
All right, we're getting a thumbs up that we are live, guys. Welcome. For everybody that's been joining, we appreciate you guys following us. And for everybody new, this is Tightline Live. Guys, this is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops National. Guys, we're excited to be here. So again, if you're watching this, we're broadcasting live from Colorado. But guys, everything we're going to cover is fishing literally everywhere in the United States. So we're excited about that. But guys, again, huge thanks to Bass Pro Shops. Huge thanks to Bass Pro Shops Denver right here locally. And obviously everybody following here on Tightline Outdoors. I'm your host, Nate Zelinsky. So guys, you know, the concept behind this show, if you are brand new to it, is to promote the education of fishing. We want everybody to be a more successful angler. So every time you're on the water, we're hoping that you will catch more and bigger fish. And obviously, some of us have great success most of the time we go out. Some of us struggle a little bit. We're hoping that this show can increase that that daily catch rate every time you're out there on the water. So bring your questions, guys. This whole thing is interactive. You comment your questions below, and if we can get to them, we're definitely going to read them out loud and hopefully answer your question out loud. So we're excited about that. So make sure you bring your questions. We also always say that if you have a friend that struggles with fishing, you have a buddy that you wish could cast better, catch more fish, be a little bit more helpful when you're out there on the water, bring him into this conversation. Share this post with him or comment his name below. Bring that person in this conversation, guys. We'll work on that person. Hopefully they start catching more fish, and it's a little bit more enjoyable for everybody out there. But again, guys, welcome to the show. I am Nate Zelinsky. Guys, here in the Western United States, or really anywhere in the country, the concept of fishing tournaments is growing. Seems like everywhere you go, there's more fishing tournaments, and whether that's open water or ice, we're actually getting ready for a tournament that's coming Saturday. So we are a couple of days away from the Ice Addiction Tournament Series brought to you by Aquaview and Clam and Bass Pro Shops. Guys, and this tournament is a very unique ice fishing tournament. There's hundreds and hundreds of anglers that gather on the ice, and they fish in a grid system. So basically all the anglers are forced to fish the same water. Nobody's going to a secret honey hole. Everybody's fishing the same grid. The holes are 25 feet apart, and every angler is limited to one rod, and they basically fish their heart out. And the single, or the angler at the end of the day with the single heaviest fish takes home the grand prize. The grand prize today is a brand new ATV. So guys, that tournament is coming up this Saturday. You look at tournaments across the country, again, bass tournaments are coming up here very shortly. There's redfish tournaments. There's a tournament series for literally every fish out there. I mean, you look at the Crappie tournament series. It's growing huge. And, the concept behind it, we want to talk real quick about tournament fishing is, some people have a negative turn on tournaments. Hey, tournaments, they just publicize fishing and, what good comes out of them. But really, if you think about tournament fishing, probably of all the techniques and most of the gear that you use on a daily basis has probably developed and or came from some sort of tournament industry. It's just what it is. The latest techniques, the latest gear, all gets tested and really built in a tournament standpoint or a tournament, type situation. So tournaments are huge for that, and there's nonetheless that if you can learn from tournaments, you can participate in a tournament, see new techniques, you figure out how to outcatch and outfish your components or your contestants around you, you're going to have a great day on the water. So again, there's a lot to be said with that, and we're going to talk about that here real quick. We have an amazing guest coming on the show here in just a couple minutes. We got Mr. Keith Kavajecz coming on. So guys, I promise you, you're going to want to get comfortable. This is going to be an amazing show tonight. We're talking with Keith and talking about getting ready for this live show. And obviously, Keith is a phenomenal tournament angler. He runs a very successful TV show, and just generally speaking, a great fisherman. And with him being a great fisherman, we were talking about concepts for the show tonight. What should we talk about? And we're going to actually talk to him about what does he do on a daily basis to get more bites. What does he do on a daily basis to catch more fish? And with the concepts of tournaments rolling around, how the tournament fishing industry is blowing up, we're going to start off with that right now. So I'm going to talk about my 2 cents on that. And really, I think, more so than anything, when we talk about tournament fishing, there's a lot of people, like we talked about last week with Joe Okada, how people want to fish just for big fish, and they literally shoot for the moon with big fish, and a lot of times come up short and come up empty-handed because they went too big too soon. But the same type concepts come down to technique, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is making the most of all your bites and trying to increase that daily bites. And I think everybody out there thinks that there's a secret lure. Now, how many of you out there that I'm talking to you right now think there's a secret lure? Everybody asks their friend, man, what are you using? What's the secret bait? What's the hot bait? You hear that so much in the fishing industry, when in reality, putting your bait in front of the right fish is probably key. More so than the specific bait, the specific color. Being in the right strike zone and being on active fish is probably the biggest key to being successful. And I say active fish, that's absolutely huge. So we're going to talk about a situation that I actually ran into this week while on the water. So I was fishing walleyes this week through the ice, and I had a big submerged roadbed, but a big flat. And I had walleyes actively feeding on top of that flat, and then I had deeper water very close to it. And my active fish were on top of that structure, and my inactive fish were actually dropping off that ledge into deeper water and allowing the deeper water and basically the pressure buildup to help them digest their meal. Long story short, the fish on top were active, the fish on bottom were inactive. So we're going to draw a little picture here. Let's just say this is our hump. The fish sitting on top of this hump were active. The fish down here are inactive. So as you look at these fish right here, these are active, these are inactive. But yet when I went out on the ice, I saw literally multiple anglers, multiple groups of anglers that saw these fish on their graph. They saw them on their flasher, and they were sitting here through the ice, dropping their jigs to these inactive fish. Now you can literally have what you'd call the magic bait. You can have gold. You can have literally the best thing in the world, $100 bills. And if a fish is not active, you're not going to catch them. Plain and simple. That's all there is to it. As opposed to this fish up here that's actively feeding, the fish that's taking a meal. That type fish will hit a variety of baits, a variety of colors, literally to where staying in the strike zone is key. And I think so many anglers put so much focus on baits and colors and that type of thing, when in reality, learning to cater to the fish, learn to put your bait right in front of that fish's face, right in front of that mouth. Make it easy on them. If you make it easy on them, you're going to catch more fish at the end of the day. We bring this down into the human relationship type situation to where, how many of us like potato chips? We say this all the time. If I were to take a bowl of potato chips and set it 15 feet away from you while you're watching this live feed, are you going to get up and get them? Some of us would. Not all of us. Most of us are going to stay focused and keep watching, and it's just too much work to go get those potato chips. As opposed, if I put those potato chips right here in front of you, literally right here on this table, I had a big bowl of potato chips, and I was watching this feed. More than likely, I'll probably reach down and grab a couple handfuls because it's easy. It's in my zone. It's within my reach. It's the same thing for fish. If you cater to these fish, if you make it easy on them, you're going to increase that daily catch. And you're going to catch them on a variety of baits and a variety of colors. So instead of putting that focus on that one bait, think about if you're in the strike zone. When it comes to tournament fishing like this, literally this tournament this coming weekend at Ice Addiction, there might be 500 anglers in a small couple acre group where they're all fishing against each other. The angler that can figure out where those fish are at, are they on bottom, are they just off bottom, what level are these fish feeding on? If you can figure out what level they're feeding on and put that bait right in their face where literally you're the angler saying, please fish, bite my bait. Just take a little bite. If you ask them politely and you cater to them, it's going to shock you how many more bites you'll deliver at the end of the day, and you can activate on those bites and land more fish. So little things like that are absolutely huge. Now, at this tournament that we're coming up this weekend, you're only allowed to use one rod. So it's one rod per angler per hole. So again, everybody's forced to use one rod. Depending on what state you're in, some states you're allowed to use one rod, some two, some unlimited. So no matter where you're listening from, there's different rules and regulations of how many rods you can use at once. And I want to talk about that because same type of thing with tournament fishing. I think so many anglers, it's all about getting lines in the water. So you talk to anglers who are like, hey, here in Colorado, I got to have 2 rods. This is a dead stick. This is my active rod. And they think that they're increasing their odds by having 2 rods. In some situations, absolutely. Mathematically, maybe. But you don't realize how much focus it takes to run 2 rods. Even if this is a dead stick and this is your jigging rod, even though you're focused on that jigging rod and you think you're putting all your attention on the jigging rod, you're still constantly watching that rod over here. You're still jiggling it every so often. You're still checking its bait. You still put focus on that rod. When you put focus on that rod, you lose focus on this rod. So all of a sudden, maybe your jigging motion has imperfections. Maybe you miss a strike when you really shouldn't miss a strike. And regardless, it's crazy how you think that those options can mess you up. And we talk about that because when you look at the tournament trail and you look at some of these phenomenal walleye anglers out there, it seemed like years ago the dead stick was the thing. Everybody wanted to have a dead stick. So when you'd be out jigging for walleyes, everybody had a bottom bouncer rod out, or this big glass rod that they would put out the side of their boat just to increase their odds. You know, if you could have 2 rods, every angler had 2 rods. But it's crazy how much focus you put on that. It seems like nowadays more people are putting focus on one rod and having a flawless technique to increase that daily catch, to help them catch a few more fish at the end of the day. And it really boils down to that, to have a flawless approach, being in that strike zone is going to help you, the angler, catch more fish at the end of the day. Because again, the small things go a long ways. Now, there's one other thing here that we got to talk about here real fast that I'm actually going to draw another picture of. I had a situation of the same type thing. There was an angler the other day that watched last week's feed. He commented a question. We didn't answer it. He commented me multiple times this week, just asking great questions about, you know, the daily catch. And this particular question was about the use of live bait. People were talking about live bait. We talked to Joe O'Connor last week on that show. He was talking about using, you know, big chubs or suckers as bait to get one bite in a tournament. Talked about Nebraska. But we were talking to anglers about this opportunity of using live bait. In a lot of places in the country, you can use live bait. With that being said, people were asking about minnows. And hey, you know, how do I stand out in a situation? How do I catch more fish? And this is something that we're going to talk about here real quick. So let's just say I have my minnow. When you take a minnow, whether it's fathead minnow, a shiner, a creek chub, a redtail chub, a sucker, whatever, most people will either, in a jigging motion or in a live bait rig where they're dragging it, they'll hook that minnow right through the mouth, right through the snout. But a lot of people, slip bobber fishing or vertical jigging ice fishing, are going to put that hook up by the dorsal fin and basically allow that minnow just to kind of sit flat. And allow it to swim around as you know, predator fish approach, or their catch that they're trying to kind of catch, or fish they're fishing for, is going to approach that minnow. But I want to talk about one thing right here, because again, we're talking about the small things that will increase your daily catch at the end of the day. So I'm going to do my my best imitation here of a fish. Again, I'm not an artist, but let's just say that this here is my fathead minnow. Everything there, sucker minnow, everything that they do, most people will put that hook somewhere right up in here, right at that dorsal fin. That minnow's going to sit kind of flat, and it can almost relax. As opposed to if I put my hook way back here, almost by the tail, that minnow's going to sit at an angle. And if I put that minnow at an angle, it sounds funny, but if you make a minnow sit vertical, their gills start to back up, and literally they almost drown. We talk about a minnow drowning, you know, yada yada, it sounds funny, but literally if a minnow or a fish has to sit totally vertical too long, they have a hard time with their gills, they have a hard time pumping everything, and essentially can kill them. So when you put a minnow hooked like that, forcing to sit at a downward angle, they absolutely panic trying to get back up flat, back up to a different position, that horizontal position, to where they have that opportunity to stay alive. So when you put a minnow like that, all of a sudden this minnow right here will panic till his last dying breath. Literally the entire moment that this minnow here is sitting there, it's in full panic mode moving. A panicked minnow catches more fish than a relaxing minnow. You put that hook up here right in that dorsal, that fish is almost like sitting in a hammock. All of a sudden that minnow or that sucker is sitting there like, oh, this isn't bad. I can relax. That minnow, that hook's right in my back. No big deal. But again, little things. I mean, literally, where you're talking about a 1/4 inch of where you'd put your hook on your live bait might mean the difference of 5, 10, 15, 20 fish on the given day. How many of you could use to catch 20 more fish at the end of a given day? Again, when you look at tournament statistics, and you look at anglers that are excelling in the industry, there's reasons for the reasons of why they're excelling. And a lot of times, more than a big concept, it's the small things that put them over the edge. Now, guys, we're going to get Keith here on the phone right now. And, guys, we're going to talk to him about those small things. We're going to talk about the tiny little minute things that help produce more fish at the end of the day. Things that help you win tournaments. Again, because more than likely, more than the big things, the small things are going to catch more fish at the end of the day. So again, those small concepts can carry you a long ways. Guys, if you're just joining us, again, this is the Tightline Live Show, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops. It's airing here at Bass Pro Shops National, as well as Bass Pro Shops Denver and Tightline Outdoors. And here in just a second, I'm going to go to the phones, and we're going to bring on Mr. Keith Kavajecz. Guys, the guy does not need an introduction. He is obviously a very well-known walleye tournament angler, host of the Next Bite TV show, and guys, literally just a genuine, amazing angler. So we're going to go to the phones here real quick. Let me throw on my earpiece. All right, Devin, we ready?
Should be good.
Perfect. All right. How are you doing, Keith?
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent, guys. Now, for everybody just tuned in, guys. This is Mr. Keith Kavajecz out of Wisconsin. I'm sure he needs no introduction. Bass Pro, truly a full-time pro walleye angler, host of the Next Bite TV show. But I'll tell you, you fish for everything. I mean, you're the only guy I see that drives his nitro boat down to the Gulf to launch it in saltwater. If there's a fish out there, you fish for it. There's no doubt.
Yeah, there's a lot of fish out there, and it's a great boat. I mean, we use it up on the Great Lakes all the time, so taking it out on the Gulf isn't that much different. And, it's just a high-target environment down here.
I love it, absolutely. Now, Keith, it's an honor for you to be on the show. We've been trying here for a little while to get you on, and I really appreciate you taking the time for this. And, we have people tuning in from everywhere. Obviously, we have a big audience out west here, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, big west, big following in the Midwest. But we have people from all over the country. I mean, from Florida to California watching this. And our goal is just to create education where people can catch more and bigger fish at the end of the day. So I want to talk to you real quick about ice fishing. Obviously, I see you on social media. You've been on the ice a lot, but the concept here is how to have people on a daily basis catch more fish. And I think that so many people are looking for a big picture. They're like, man, I got to totally switch it up. I got to get a new bait, a new technique. As to where I personally think that at the long run, at the end of the day, a small tweak, if people just paid attention to the small details, I think small details take people a lot further on the day of fishing than people think they would. Again, whether it's heavy line versus thin line, or the way they hook their bait, or fishing in shallow water versus deep. But we would love to hear where you've been fishing, and what's your opinion on that? What daily do you do different as a full-time pro that helps you catch more fish that maybe the other people might overlook?
Well, I have been ice fishing quite a bit already this year. I actually fished quite a bit before I came down south here, mainly up in northern Minnesota, Red Lake, Lake of the Woods. I did fish a little around home and up in Green Bay a little bit. But, I think one of the coolest parts of ice fishing is that it's the only time you get to fish where you actually get to watch on your fish finder not only fish, but your lure and how the fish react to that lure. And I think that's what makes ice fishing so special, is that you can literally be moving your bait, see a fish come in, and watch and see what they do. Do they follow it? Do they stay there long? When you pop it a little hard, do they jump out of there? Or do they pound it and hit it? You can tell right away if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And, and like you said, if you've got fish coming in, you can start to adjust things, whether that's colors or your cadence or your equipment, or whatever it might be. Now, if you aren't seeing fish, you also know it's time to move. So that is one of the coolest parts about ice fishing is that you literally not only get to graph and see fish, but you get to graph and see your lure and how it's working and how the fish are reacting to it.
There's no doubt. The real-time experience of ice fishing is there. And I think that's huge, especially talking about how the fish aren't there, because I think that everybody's got a different concept of how fish, or how fast fish come through, and when to change your bait up and things like that. And I think a lot of it comes down to what you're seeing. And me personally, if I have 3 walleyes coming that don't take the bait, I start changing things up. Some people have a longer expectation or a shorter expectation. And then a lot of times the walleyes don't come through, and everybody's like, change my bait. And I'm like, man, it doesn't really matter if they're not there to hit it. It doesn't matter what you have on; they're not going to hit. It's time to move spots, and there's a lot that comes into that. On the daily basis, what's the one thing you'd credit to catching more fish? Electronics?
Out on the ice, you mean?
Yeah, on the ice.
Yeah, out on the ice, I think electronics more than anything. I mean, it's just, like you said, it's not only just seeing the fish and seeing how they're, but you can tell by how fast the fish comes in. Maybe they're just cruising along on the outside edge of the cone, and they aren't even really coming into your bait. They're just kind of swimming by, and they're not interested in eating, compared to all of a sudden, sometimes you don't even see them on your depth finder, and they're just coming in so fast, they're just on all of a sudden. So, you can right away start to almost tell the mood of the fish that the fish are in. You can right away, if a fish comes in fast, usually they're pretty hot, and you can be a little bit more aggressive with them. You can raise up the bait faster. You can jiggle it harder. You can really force them, give it hard pops and make it jump around down there, compared to a fish that's kind of coming in lethargic, and you just kind of know you got to maybe yo-yo them and real small movements. So yeah, electronics are key out on the ice, and it is what makes it really fun.
There's no doubt, and the fact that electronics have come so far lately. I mean, you just look at the Lowrance product, with being able to create your own maps. Where literally years ago, if they didn't make a map for your water, especially like us out here west, you've obviously been out west here, elk hunting, you've seen what it's like, and we don't have the availability of a lot of mapping. So now the fact that we can do it ourselves is literally changing the game for us. I mean, 100% to be able to find contours and not have to drill 1,000 holes trying to find that key drop off or that key location. So it's absolutely crucial, and be able to take them from your boat right onto the ice is pretty amazing.
Well, I mean,
now Keith, right now,
and I will tell you, beyond the fish finding part of the units, almost all of them now have a built-in GPS, and it's not like you're carrying a puck or all that stuff. It's right in the unit. You can actually move around and if you marked it in the summer, you can very precisely within feet get back to that exact tip of that point or that sharpest part of the break or whatever it might be that you think might be holding the fish. So yeah, the combo units are just make it that much more better.
We got some people asking, what are you using for electronics right now on the ice?
I use Elite 5s. Lowrance Elite 5s are a real good one. I did also run the new Hook 2 this year, and that's equally as good. You don't need, a lot out on the ice. They all, have a fast scroll speed on them. They're all pretty easy to just turn on and just let them kind of run. The only thing I ever adjust on the units is I'll bump up the sensitivity a little until my water column starts to kind of get a little bit of black marks in it. Meaning I've kind of pushed up the sensitivity as high as it'll go, and then I just back it off just a hair. But you should real easily see the bottom, real easily see whatever bait you're down there, even all the way down to a 16th-ounce jig or whatever. And it's just easy to use that way. I mean, it's almost all automated.
Absolutely. And I think the big thing about you using a lot of times even liquid crystals is you have a playback. So I think a lot of people are talking about flashers nowadays, and you talk about the speed of the LCDs and the fact that you can watch your jig, you can look away, talk to a partner, talk to a camera, turn back and see if you missed something. As to where the flasher, you're like, nothing changed, and you can literally have 5 fish come in and leave, and you never see that again.
Right, and it's not just leave, but what if you look up and the fish comes in, you don't have an idea when you look down, oh, there's a fish. Did he come in hot? Did he come in slow? Did he come in aggressively? Did he come, you can't see that unless if you have that LCD drawing you a nice picture of that. And I'm not against flashers. Guys who fish flashers are very good with them. They can see what's down there. I just claim it's easier on an LCD. I get a picture. I can almost mentally make a picture in my mind of what that fish is doing. And a lot of times, because that picture is drawn, I can more quickly make the adjustment that I should be making for that fish that's in the hole right now.
Absolutely. Now, Keith, I want to talk ice fish just a little more, but I also, real quick, so we got a lot of questions about it. Everybody is asking about that last show on the Detroit River. So people fell in love, pitching jigs in high current situations. Yeah. So we're going to tie that into this same concept of thinking outside the box, where literally maybe the same jig, maybe the same everything, but instead of vertically slipping the river with it, you're pitching it. And again, the whole concept of tonight's show is the little things that increase the daily catch and make you more successful. And again, like I keep saying, the small things go a long way. So what inspired that show? How did that come to play? I mean, I personally, for people that don't know, that's one of the fastest rivers out there. I mean, it's flowing.
Yeah, it's probably flowing anywhere from 5 to 7 miles an hour. So it's humping. I mean, it's really going. And for those who haven't fished it out there, it's basically the river between Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. And in the spring, in April, they get a lot of fish flowing both ways, actually. Erie fish go up to St. Clair, St. Clair fish go down to Erie. And you get this real cross-section, so it's a great place to go for big fish. Typically, middle of April is a great time. When we got there, though, you typically are just vertical jigging out on the channel edges and stuff and catching lots of fish. It was a tough bite. We kind of had to work around a little. We were, fishing some of the spots I knew. I had John Hoyer with me. He's another tournament pro. We were fishing some of his spots. It just wasn't happening. We were catching fish, but nothing really good. Then all of a sudden, we were just driving by. We fish a lot on the Mississippi and on like the Fox River over here and stuff. when you see warm water coming in from a factory or from a power plant or something in the spring like that, a little bit of change in temperature can oftentimes draw in bait fish. And if there's bait fish, there's walleyes. Well, we were driving along, we see this outflow coming out, but more importantly, we saw birds diving down in the water, which the only reason they're going to do that is to eat something. Well, if they're eating from the top, typically fish are eating from the bottom. And we just pulled up alongside them. We got that nice Motor Guide XI5 trolling motor, anchored up just outside of it. Made one pitch in, let my jig just kind of drift down with that fast current. As soon as it fell out of the fast current and in the really fast current from that outflow and into the somewhat fast current from the river, just that little transitional break right there. Guy got the nicest thump in the world, set the hook, and here comes in a nice walleye. And we just sat there for 3 or 4 hours just pounding on fish and getting great footage and having a great time. And like you said, it was just a little thing. Happened to see the birds. I knew about warm water. Not many people do it over in the Detroit River, though. It's usually a pretty easy bite vertical jigging, much easier than holding right next to a fast current and stuff. But in this case, that's where the fish were, and it was a riot. And yeah, it was a great show.
It looked like a fun show. People were talking about, we said we were going to have you on a guest, and people were immediately talking about that show. So, again, just inspired the small things. We got a couple more questions. Devin's going to read them here.
All right, Keith, here's a question specifically for you, and it's How do you set up your lines specifically for planer board fishing? So open water fishing.
Yeah, typically open water fishing, what you're going to want to use is monofilament. I've been using 10-pound XT for, as long as I can remember. It's changed over the years. They've come up with bigger formulas and stuff, but 10-pound XT is a great line, not real expensive. It'll fill up your line counter reels real nice. One good reason to use it is that there's also an app out there called Precision Trolling, which allows you to actually know how deep your crankbaits are running. And especially out in open water where there's suspended fish, you can't just run your crankbaits down to the bottom. You got to actually fish them above the marks that you're seeing. And the only way you know your crankbait is, above them is to know what depth they're running. And that app called Precision Trolling, you can go out there and get it. I think there's 350 different lures on there. Whatever lure you want to troll is on there. You can see fish at 15 foot down, decide you should run your baits at 13 foot, roll up 13 on that app. It tells you let out 82 feet of line. And when you let out 82 feet of line, you can be real confident your bait is running right where it should above those fish. And a lot of the data, almost all of the data, in fact, on the app was done with 10-pound XT as well as some other line types. The 10-pound XT is on there, so that makes it a real good choice because as soon as you switch around diameters of line, all those depths are going to be thrown off a little bit. So 10XT, fill them spools up, use a line counter reel, precision trolling to put them in the right spot, and you're going to be good to go.
Excellent. And that being said, there's a lot of videos out there on dialing in and getting the correct amount of line on your line counters, but can you elaborate on that a little bit to get those reels dialed in so they're accurate?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it. I know that like Mark Romanek, who's part of Precision Trolling, likes to do that a lot. I don't worry about that quite as much. I think if you keep your spools fairly full and pretty consistent, the most important thing is to get close to the right zone. So if you're thinking you're in 13 and you're really in 12 and a half, it isn't going to make that much difference. The key is though, when you start catching fish with 82 feet of line out, that all your spools are pretty much filled up the same, so that when you let out 82 feet on the next one, it puts that bait right in that same hot zone again. So I make sure my line counters stay about the same fullness. I keep them, probably 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the spool full, so that each revolution lets out more line. But other than that, I don't worry too much about that what do they call it? Calibrating your reels and stuff like that.
Calibrating, yeah.
Yeah, I just make sure they're all full the same, so they're all letting out the same amount of line, and that gives me that reproducibility I want.
Absolutely, and that's key. I mean, getting the first bite's always tough, but duplicate is always a key thing for us, and we really get that here. Out in Colorado, we have so many bait fish in these western reservoirs. I mean, it's ridiculous, and a lot of times our fish can get a little lazy. So a lot of times that strike zone can be key. And again, as long as you're able to get close, but you see guys all the time at the boat dock. They got one full spool, and they got another spool that's half, and they got 3 different size reels, and that type of thing gets into be a troublemaking situation. Yes. But as long as you're semi-close, you're going to be good.
Right.
Absolutely. We're going to take one more question, Keith, here before we let you go.
All right, so this question, he's new to shivering and wants to know what you do different from summertime open water to shivering through the ice.
Talk about a technique that you blew up overnight. You right there.
Yeah, Gary Parsons and I that was really a lucky deal to kind of, I won't say stumble on it, but kind of develop that shivering. And what's kind of been cool about it is now it's probably been 3 years since we first started casting glide baits. That's what shivering is a shiver minnow that we cast out there and work back. And if people want to really see how to do it, you really got to almost see it for me to describe it. Just go to our website, thenextbite.com. We got tons of videos on there showing you exactly how. And what's cool is actually from when we first started shivering, some of the cadences, we did them back then, we still do now, but we've actually developed several more cadences just, again, that you experiment around with and can fire up those fish and get them going. So shivering is a cool technique. Like I said, in the summer, a lot of times we're casting the shiver minnow. We're actually casting it up to any kind of structure where we mark fish on it. And it's clear water. It's a very visual technique. And then when we're fishing it in the summer, a lot of times what we're doing is popping the rod and then immediately giving the rod tip slack. So it's almost like a whipping action. And what that does is let that shiver minnow jump to the side, then it immediately turns around and returns to where it was. It's almost like you can get a cadence where it's just jumping around underneath the water, not even really touching the bottom all the time. And that fires the fish up. And then once they're fired up, the last stroke, what you do is just hop it up and kind of hold your rod tip up, let that bait glide. A lot of times they'll hit it on the glide, and then also when it hits the bottom, they'll pin it right to the bottom because they just get so mad at it when it's jumping back and forth that now when it's slow gliding or hitting the bottom, they're going to take advantage of that and just hammer it as hard as they can. So it's a great technique in summer, especially to fire up fish that aren't even really wanting to bite. It can fire them up and get you some bites when you can't do it with any other techniques. The difference in winter is we use that same jump and glide technique there, popping the rod up and then quickly giving it slack so it turns around and comes back. But many times in ice fishing, that's only going to be an attractant. You'll actually got to watch that depth finder, and that bait will be jumping around, kind of drawing that fish in. It's jumping outside the hole actually, or the cone of the hole or whatever. It'll jump right out and then come back. I think it's an attractant, but one of the cool things about the shiver minnow is once those fish come in, if you just start popping your rod tip, not hard, not 5-6 inches up, but just kind of in place popping it, because that shiver minnow is top weighted, it will actually kind of fall to the side, and then when you pop it again, it flips over and falls to the other side, and it'll actually sit in place, and it almost looks like a minnow just kind of holding in place, like a minnow in current where they're just kind of holding. You can get that shiver minnow just sitting there kind of dancing there in one spot. It ain't moving up and down, and it isn't jumping out and stuff. It's just sitting in one spot, shivering. It's just sitting there, wiggling there, and then you can do that in combination with a lift, and many times the fish just smack that. So not only can you draw in fish with a shiver minnow by making it hop and glide, but then you can sit there and pound it in one place, and those fish just can't stand that bait just sitting in front of them, moving back and forth.
I mean, that's it. And again, you're talking about the small things. I mean, it just goes right along with the whole concept of taking a bait that is used for a lot of different things and tweaking it up just a little bit, and obviously creating an entire concept of new ways to catch fish. There's no doubt.
You touched this a little bit on that first episode of the new season of The Next Bite when you guys were ice fishing on Mille Lacs, I think. But do you tip it with any bait, or do you prefer to or not to? Right.
So in summer, we put no bait on it. You don't need it. You just got to play with the colors a little bit. I think they think it's a bait or something jumping around on there. It's kind of like a crankbait. You just don't need no bait on it. But in winter, I do typically tip the middle hook, the treble hook on the bottom, with a just the head of half of a minnow or the head of a minnow or something like that. Just to give it a little bit of meat, especially when it's sitting there, kind of just popping back and forth. That little wiggle that it's got down there, that head just kind of dangles below, and it gives them something to trigger on that treble hook. You want it to bite the treble hook, obviously, so that little head on there can do that. But in summer, no bait. Just let her rip.
Let her riff. Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. Now, real quick here before I let you go, I know you got a lot of stuff going on. What is everything, the concept of your show? What's the next bite? Where are you personally at now? Where are you going to be? What bite are you looking forward to most here in the very near future?
Well, obviously, we got to shoot a couple of ice fishing shows for 2018. or 2019 now, I guess it is. And I'm actually thinking about coming out west. There's been a pretty good ice fishing bite out on Fort Peck out there. There was some big fish, so I'm talking to some guys about maybe coming out there in early March. The other thing I might do is head directly the other way. And, if Erie happens to freeze up again this year, it's pretty hard to pass up on those big monsters coming back from the eastern basin back to spawn, and they're big and fat, and, man, they come into the hole and just throttle your bait. So I might have to go out that way, too, and fish it. Otherwise, we'll end up somewhere, in the Midwest, fishing a couple ice fishing shows. And then I know one of my first open water shows this year is go up to the Rainy Lake on the Rainy River, and get that bite that ends on April 15th is the last day you can fish it. So I'm going to try and get up there in April and shoot a show up there with Chris Grandrud and hopefully catch some big walleyes up there. So I got some good shows starting out, and tournaments start right away in May, so that'll get her going.
Absolutely, Keith. We appreciate it. And you're always welcome out here, Wes. There's no doubt. But when Erie freezes, very few of us have ever had that chance to fish that. But everybody who has knows what a special treat that is. It's a fishery like no other. So we appreciate that. Now, Keith, real quick, tell everybody where they get all this information. Obviously, you guys developed the wealth of knowledge to make anglers better on a daily basis. Everybody follows you socially, but where can everybody find and get more information?
Right. Yes. Obviously, I post a lot on Facebook. Keith Kavajecz, Facebook, my fan page or whatever. But the cool thing is, we just revamped all of the Next Bite websites. So the nextbite.com or the nextbite.tv, either one. We revamped it all because our website is mainly informational. We don't, we've got a ton of videos. We take little tips out of the TV show. We take all the tips that we shoot for other companies and stuff. Those are all on there. So tons of video, tons of articles. And the good thing is now that our people have went through and keyworded most of those articles and videos. So if you're interested in shiver minnows, go up in the search bar, type in shiver. It's going to show you all the articles, all the videos, all the tips that we've got out there for that. Slow death, flicker minnows, precision trolling, whatever topic you've got, we've got it really nicely organized now. And literally we have hundreds of videos, maybe thousands. We have hundreds of thousands of articles. So there's just a ton of information out there that you can just basically see shivering, see whatever you need to see the video, read about it, and should be able to get it ready and go out on the water. So that's all out on the Next Bite. And we actually have all our schedules for TV on there, so people can find when we're watching it, see what's coming up in the upcoming episodes or whatever. And then again, just Next Bite has even got a really nice Facebook following. We post a lot on there too. So we're out there. We got the information out there, but start out with the nextbite.com and you'll find it all.
Awesome. Keith, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Again, I appreciate it more than you know, guys. And again, you got to make sure you follow this guy, Keith Kavajecz. He is the informational source and the angler to be watching. So, Keith, thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Absolutely. Alrighty, guys, that was Keith Kavajecz. Literally a guy that I've looked up to my entire life. Just an angler that gets after it in all situations. And I'll tell you what, he thinks outside the box. Every time that I've seen him on the water, back in the day, I used to tournament fish against him. My very first tournaments when I was, a very young angler. And just always willing to try new stuff, because I think that's the biggest thing, is somebody get stuck up in concepts of what you should or shouldn't do. Hey, it's a walleye, it's only going to be in this depth, or whatever the concepts are. But the concepts of thinking outside the box, just doing different things to increase your daily catch can be huge, and he's a guy that definitely does it. So very fortunate to have him on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. And again, tonight's entire show, guys, the concept was changing the small things, little things, talking about working a shiver minnow slightly different, taking a normal glide bait that people have been using forever and just tweaking it up in a certain way to fish it with way more aggression. But again, it's a small change to dramatically catch more fish and bigger fish. Talk about hooking your minnow way back by the tail to where that minnow sits flat, almost wants to drown, to where that minnow's always going to have movement to try to get itself